Hello everyone, welcome to Nightmare Nexus. I'm here to take you on a journey tonight. I know many of you use these videos to relax or fall asleep. So before we begin, hit that like button and subscribe to Nightmare Nexus. Also, let me know in the comments where are you from and what time are you watching this. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights, and let's step into the unknown. I have always been drawn to places left behind abandoned buildings, forgotten ruins, places where time stands still. There's something about them, the way they hold on to the past, whispering stories no one was meant to hear. That's why, when I heard about the abandoned hillside asylum, I knew I had to see it for myself. They said it shut down decades ago after reports surfaced of inhumane experiments on the patients. Some say the doctors vanished overnight, leaving everything behind. Others claim some of the patients were never truly discharged. But I didn't believe in ghosts. At least, not then. The asylum stood on the outskirts of town, hidden behind a rusting iron gate and overgrown trees. The building was massive, its stone walls cracked and covered in ivy. The windows were shattered, yawning black holes staring out into nothing. The air was thick, too still, as if the world around it had stopped breathing. I stepped inside. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, the air changed. The silence wasn't empty, it was waiting. My footsteps echoed eerily as I made my way down the ruined hallways. Rusted wheelchairs sat abandoned, patient files were scattered across the floor, their pages yellowed with time. And then I saw it. A door at the end of the corridor. Unlike the others, this door was pristine, untouched by time. Slowly, I pushed it open. Inside, there was only a single hospital bed. The sheets were clean, perfectly tucked, as if someone had been expecting me. A chair sat beside it, and against the far wall, a mirror. Everything in me screamed to leave, but I couldn't. I took a step closer. The mirror was old, its surface scratched. A reflection stared back at me, and then it moved. I hadn't moved, but the reflection had. My breath caught in my throat. My fingers felt ice cold. I turned to run, and someone was lying in the bed. I hadn't seen them before, but now they were there. A frail, bony figure. Their head tilted toward me, hollow eyes sunken deep into their face. Their skin clung to their bones, their lips dry and cracked. But when they spoke, I felt it. "You're late for your treatment." I stumbled back, slamming into the door, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The figure sat up, their joints creaking like old wood. "You came back," they whispered. I shook my head, my entire body trembling. I've never been here before." The patient tilted their head, and then they laughed. "Then why are you wearing the uniform?" My stomach dropped. I looked down and my clothes were no longer mine. Instead of my jacket and jeans, I was in a patient's gown. My hands shook as I reached for the patient file on the table. I flipped it open, eyes scanning desperately for the name. It wasn't patient number 108 anymore. It was my name. My vision blurred. The walls seemed to shift around me. The laughter grew louder, echoing through the empty halls. I turned to the mirror again, but this time, my reflection wasn't there. I wasn't outside the story anymore. I was part of it. And before the darkness swallowed me whole, I heard the voice whisper one last time, "Welcome back." There are houses that creak, houses that groan, and then there are houses that whisper. When I was 10, my family moved into an old Victorian home on the edge of town. It wasn't the kind of place people wanted to live in. The paint peeled in long, jagged strips. The shutters hung loose, swinging in the wind like broken arms. The trees in the yard bent unnaturally, their branches scratching against the windows like they were trying to get in. But we didn't have a choice. My father had lost his job, and the house was cheap. Almost too cheap. I should have known then. The first time I heard the whisper, I was alone in my room, unpacking boxes. It was faint, just below the sound of the wind outside. A soft, urgent hiss. "Come downstairs." I froze. I turned to the door, expecting to see my mother standing there. But the hallway was empty. I told myself I had imagined it. Houses make noises. Old wood shifts. Air moves through cracks. It was nothing. But that night, I woke up to my bedroom door open. I was sure I had closed it. Positive. But now, it was open just a crack. Enough for the darkness to slip through. Enough for me to hear it again. "Come downstairs." I squeezed my eyes shut, pulling the blanket over my head. I did not go downstairs, and I should have never gone downstairs. The cellar door. The next few weeks were strange. Doors I had locked would be open in the morning. Objects moved from where I had left them. My mother blamed my little brother. My father blamed the wind. But I knew it was the house. One evening, while helping my mother put away groceries, I dropped an apple, and it rolled across the floor, right up to the cellar door. That door had always been locked. My father said it was because the steps were unsafe. We weren't allowed down there. But as I bent to pick up the apple, I felt it again. The cold, slithering whisper. "Come downstairs." I stood up so fast that I knocked over a chair. My mother scolded me, told me to be careful. But all I could do was stare at the cellar door. That night, I dreamed of it. I saw myself standing in front of the cellar, reaching for the knob. My fingers wrapped around the cold metal, and I twisted it open. And in the dream, the stairs went down forever. Something in the dark. A week later, my little brother disappeared. My parents called the police. Neighbors searched the woods, but I knew where he had gone. The cellar door was open. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stood at the top of the staircase, staring down into the yawning blackness below. "Daniel?" My voice barely made a sound. Silence. And then, "Come downstairs." I stepped forward, gripping the railing. The air smelled damp, rotten, like something that had been buried for a long, long time. The stairs creaked beneath me. Halfway down, the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, running back up, but the door was gone. Nothing but a solid, endless wall. The whisper came again, all around me now, curling against my skin like frozen breath. "Keep going." I turned back toward the dark, and Daniel stood at the bottom of the stairs. At least, I think it was him. His face was pale, his eyes wide, his lips slightly parted like he was trying to speak but couldn't. His clothes were the same, but something was wrong. His skin looked too thin, like something else was wearing him. "Daniel?" I whispered. His head jerked, not like a nod. Not like anything human, just a sharp, unnatural twitch. Then he smiled. It was the wrong smile. Too wide. Too many teeth. "Come downstairs." My feet were frozen in place. The whisper wasn't coming from him. It was coming from behind him. From the black. From something waiting in the dark. Daniel, or the thing pretending to be him, stepped toward me. His hands were wrong. Too long. Fingers twitching, curling. I turned and ran. The house never lets go. I don't remember how I got out. All I remember is waking up outside, lying in the damp grass, the cellar door swinging open behind me. My parents found me screaming. They never found Daniel. We moved a month later. My parents don't talk about the house. They don't talk about him. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I wake up to my bedroom door open. And I swear I hear it. A soft, hissing whisper. "Come downstairs." I never believed in ghosts. I never believed in curses, haunted houses, or things that lurked in the dark. Those were just stories people told to scare themselves, to make the night seem more dangerous than it really was. But then, I moved into that apartment. And now, I don't sleep near windows anymore. I had just started my new job in the city when I found the apartment. It was small, cheap, and had a great view of the street below. The landlord seemed eager to rent it out, almost too eager. He barely let me ask questions before pushing the lease in front of me. I should have taken that as a sign. The first night, everything was normal. I unpacked, made some food, and collapsed into bed, exhausted. The only sound was the occasional car passing below and the soft hum of the city beyond my window. Then, at exactly 3:14 a.m., I woke up. I didn't know why, but something felt wrong. I turned my head, and that's when I saw it. A shadow in my window. It wasn't a reflection. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was inside the glass, standing in the frame, staring in at me from the darkness beyond. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then, just as suddenly as I had seen it, it was gone. I told myself it was a dream, just my mind playing tricks on me. But the next night, at exactly 3:14 a.m., I woke up again, and the shadow was closer. By the third night, I was too afraid to sleep. I stayed up, watching the window, determined to prove to myself that there was nothing there. But at exactly 3:14 a.m., the air changed. The temperature dropped. My breath came out in mist. And then, tap, tap, tap. A sound at the window. Slow, deliberate. Fingernails against the glass. I turned my head, every muscle in my body screaming at me to run. But I looked, and this time, the shadow wasn't outside the window. It was inside the room. I don't remember moving, but suddenly I was out of bed, flipping on every light in my apartment. My chest heaved, my skin ice cold. But the shadow was gone. The window was closed, locked, like it had never been touched. I convinced myself that I was imagining things, that stress and exhaustion were making me see things that weren't real. And then, one night, while brushing my teeth, I looked up at the mirror, and the reflection looking back at me wasn't mine. It wore my face. It had my eyes. But its mouth was wrong. It was smiling. I wasn't. I turned. There was nothing behind me. But when I looked back at the mirror, the reflection was still smiling. By now, I was barely sleeping. Every night, I sat awake, watching the window, waiting. And then, on the final night, the whisper came, so soft, curling through the room like smoke. Let me in. My body locked up. I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. The whisper came again. Let me in. And then, my bedroom door creaked open, slowly, inch by inch, and standing there, in the doorway, was me. But it wasn't me. It had my face, my clothes, my eyes, but it was smiling. And then, in my own voice, it whispered, "You've been watching too long, now it's my turn." And the lights went out. I was 8 years old when I first saw him. It was the middle of the night. I had woken up thirsty and was about to get out of bed when I saw it. My closet door was open, just a crack. And inside, standing in the darkness, was a man. He was tall, his body hidden in the shadows, but I could see his eyes wide, unblinking and staring directly at me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream for my parents, but the moment I opened my mouth, the man raised a finger to his lips. Shh! My blood turned to ice. Then, without a sound, the closet door slowly closed. The next morning, I told my parents. I begged them to check my closet. My dad opened the door, waved his hands inside, and laughed. "See? Nothing here, buddy." But I knew what I saw. That night, I made sure my closet door was shut tight before I went to bed. I even pushed a chair in front of it, just in case. At 3 a.m., I woke up again. The chair was moved, and the closet door was open, just a crack. I stayed awake until sunrise, watching the door, waiting for it to move again. But it didn't. When my parents found me still sitting in bed the next morning, They told me it was just a nightmare, that my imagination was running wild. I stopped telling them after that. But every night, no matter how tightly I shut it, my closet door would always be open by morning. As I got older, I started convincing myself it was all in my head. Maybe I really was dreaming it. By the time I was 13, I stopped worrying about the closet. I stopped checking it before bed. And for a while, nothing happened. Until one night, when I woke up and heard whispering. It was coming from the closet. The door was open, just a crack. My heart pounded as I sat up, straining to hear the voice. It was too soft to understand, but it was there. Someone was whispering my name. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But then, I realized something. The whispering wasn't coming from inside the closet. It was coming from behind me, right next to my bed. I turned, but there was nothing there. Years passed. I grew up. We moved to a different house. I told myself I was free from whatever had been in that closet. And I was. Until last night, at exactly 3 a.m., I woke up. Something felt wrong. And when I turned my head toward my closet, the door was open, just a crack. I don't know how. I locked it before bed. I haven't opened it in months. And then, from inside the closet, I heard a whisper. A voice I hadn't heard since I was a child. Found you. I was taking a few days off, spending it camping in the woods. I was in some forest, a few hours from my town, and had set up camp at the end of a 4-hour trail. I had spent the night there already, and had noticed this thin path leading out from the campsite. I had no idea where it went, and it wasn't on the map of the area. But, having nothing better to do on that second day, I thought I'd go for a short hike down the path just to see if it led anywhere cool. Maybe a small pond or a waterfall or something. I brought a backpack with food and water, in case I'd be out longer than expected. Walking through the trail, it was very obvious that almost nobody used either, at least. Hadn't used it in a long time, maybe even years. It was very thin and overgrown in a lot of sections, and I didn't see any signs of people in shoe prints or anything. This went on for several miles, taking around 2 hours before I finally found the end. And it wasn't what I expected. There was a house, a cabin sitting in the woods. At first sight, there was no mistaking that it was abandoned. Moss and vines were growing out of the wooden siding, and the doors and windows were all open. Before approaching any further, I looked around at my surroundings, just checking for anything, because this wasn't a normal thing to just stumble across. The woods were calm and unsettlingly still. I went up to the doorway and poked my head in, looking down the front hallway. There was dust and debris lying all over the floors, but it was otherwise barren. I stepped in a little further. The air smelled of mildew and rotting wood, but as I crept through the rooms, there wasn't much to see. Feeling uneasy, though, I was about to turn around and leave. But then, a small glimmer caught the side of my eye. On one of the closed wooden doors, the handle had been ripped off and replaced by a silver padlock. It almost looked brand new, and matched nothing else in the house. My curiosity immediately had me thinking, why was there a padlock on the door to an otherwise empty and ruined cabin? The more I looked at it, though, the more that uneasy feeling took over me. I couldn't bring myself to investigate. I quickly left the house and went back to the path. Just as I entered the trail again, I heard a single footstep on the wooden floor inside the house. I turned and looked at the doorway, but saw nothing. So, I kept on walking, trying to distance myself from that place. As I walked back, though for the whole 2 hours I kept hearing footsteps in the distance. Like someone was following me. The trees densely covered the area, making it impossible to see that far. When I got back to the camp, I got a fire going early and just sat and waited, listening and looking to see if anyone showed up. By nightfall, I hadn't heard anything else. But as the hours got later, I started hearing it again, footsteps, out in the distance, far beyond the light of the campfire, but definitely close enough for them to see the light. It went on for several hours, hearing a line of footsteps every 10 to 15 minutes. Still, though, I was never able to see them, and eventually, it got so late that I knew I had to sleep. So, I left the campfire going as I got inside my tent. I was in and out of sleep for the rest of the night, waking up at every small sound the woods made. After getting almost no sleep, I left. What that cabin was doing there, and whoever had followed me that night, I'll never know. I can't say what they intended to do, but their disturbing, stalking behavior only lets me assume the worst. And yet, I can never seem to stop thinking about the disturbing possibilities of what was behind that locked door.